Welcome! You have now arrived to Jakobstorg and you will now hear about the voting rights demonstration that took place here in April 1902. The voting rights demonstration issued the injustice when it came to voting. The conflict from which the demonstration emerged involved all parts of society, but mostly the men and women of the working class. Back in 1902, only men with a significant fortune were allowed to vote, and those accounted for 8%. This resulted in injustice in society, and the working class did not feel valued and could not have an impact on society as the way the upper class could. During the same year, and for the first time in history, the government started to develop a Voting Rights Act. In March the same year, the former Attorney General Hjalmar Hammarskjöld presented the new Voting Rights Act. The people responded with mixed emotions as the Voting Rights Act included both improvements regarding democratization, but reforms were also introduced which were not as beneficial for the process. As an example, the income limit for voting was decreased from 800 to 600 Swedish kronor. However, the age limit for voting was increased from 21 to 25 years old. Furthermore, bachelors were only allowed half a vote until they were 40 years old. Women were not allowed to vote at all. This was upsetting for both men and women, and after a long period of injustice, the newspaper Socialdemokraten encouraged people to go out and demonstrate for the right to vote, and that is exactly what the people did. In 1902, the police granted the people the right to gather in Stockholm and listen to Hjalmar Branting, the former social democratic leader, who was set to hold a speech by Liljanskogen. The 30,000 demonstrators were allowed to play music and wave with their flags during the speech, but they were not allowed to do it on the way there or back to their homes. Their intentions were peaceful, and the demonstrators only wanted to shed a light at the injustice, but instead, everything turned violent. After the speech, around 3 p.m., the crowd of people spread from Liljanskogen into the city, where the police had closed several streets. Svea Livgarde protected the castle, and Gustav Adolfs torg was closed. After the speech, the demonstrators headed toward Gustav Adolfs torg, but were stopped by police here in Jakobsberg. The police stood prepared with weapons, such as batons and sabers. The police also rode on horses. The crowd got agitated and difficult for the police to control. This collision resulted in many wounded and approximately 60 to 72 arrests. A report from Smålandsposten described the scenery and how victims were brought in covered in blood and with their faces crushed. Many had broken arms, clothes torn apart, and one had had his ear chopped off. After the massive collision on Jakobstorg, the demonstrators headed toward Folkets hus at Norra Bantorget, where brutal fights and chaos started. Hjalmar Branting and several others tried to calm the crowd from the balcony of Folkets hus, but without much success. It wasn't until 12 p.m. the calm was finally setting in.
Now to the consequences. Yay! Okay, so the voting rights demonstration in 1902 was one of many demonstrations which hastened the democratization of Stockholm. It led to the movement of democratization receiving more attention and awareness, and the event was written about in many different newspapers. As mentioned previously, the demonstration stood out because of the violence which was seen, and more specifically, the violence from the national police. As Sofia mentioned, demonstrators had been beaten by the police until they were unconscious. One person got their arm broken and crushed, and there was one man who even got his ear cut off, and this happened right by this church. As a result, people became outraged since there was an unnecessary amount of violence used, which was extremely brutal. And after this incident, the liberal politician Adolf Hedin played a significant role. He demanded to inform the government about the police brutality in the demonstration, but when trying to do so, he was actually denied by the chamber. And in turn, this led to even increased frustration, which resulted in all members of the parliament confronting the current Prime Minister von Otter with demands regarding the right to demonstrate and, most importantly, an end to the police terror. And this actually led to the head of the police, Robert Dixon, informing and ordering the police to in the future merely regulate the demonstrations in a peaceful manner. This had a positive short-term effect on society, as it led to people becoming more comfortable with organizing, as well as participating in demonstrations, and this potentially allowed the democratization process to happen faster. And apart from this, it may actually have led to individuals feeling more secure in society, and when people saw that change could be reached through demands and demonstrations, they perhaps became more inspired and more confident in creating change for themselves. Maybe groups and organizations felt more protected by society and started to sense that democratization was in fact a common goal for society rather than for merely some individuals and groups. Apart from this, a more long-term consequence was that the situation regarding the right to vote started to alter. The Andrakammaravtalet, which was a form of election, was held 3 years after the demonstration, and in this election, 50,000 more men were eligible to vote. And even though the number may not be significantly high, it was still evidence to how past demonstrations had an impact on the voting system and led to democratization evolving further. And as we all may know, actors are always important, and as for this historical event, one can argue that one of the main actors was the people and the citizens of Stockholm at the time. Civil activists and their constant will to create change led to increased awareness of the movement, and the government had increased pressure concerning changing the law and the right to vote. And apart from this, one can argue how certain individuals had a significant role in the event. And two of those were August Palm and Henke Berggren, who were two participants of the demonstration. So August Palm, he was an agitator best known for promoting socialist ideas and did this through holding speeches in the entire country. Berggren was also a significant actor, leaning more to the extreme left of the political spectrum, and he promoted the importance of using contraception, which at the time was a highly controversial topic. And the fact that these two gentlemen participated in the demonstration perhaps led to increased media attention of the event and made it more important. Perhaps the government felt increased pressure of changing the legislation when people of somewhat fame who had more influence participated in the demonstration. Also, what is important to mention is that since this was a very local event happening in Stockholm, it mainly had a domestic impact rather than a global effect on democratization as a whole.
However, in 1902, many countries around the world started to question the voting rights system. In 1902, Australia established equal voting rights for both men and women. Finland achieved universal suffrage in 1906, making them the second country in the world to establish universal suffrage. Hearing about demonstrations like these encouraged people around the world to act themselves. In the beginning of the 20th century, we can see a trend involving voting rights, and some countries adapted their laws immediately, whilst other countries took longer to change their law.
Okay, so in conclusion, the voting rights demonstration in 1902 was a clear and powerful event that marked the importance of voting rights demonstrations in Sweden and around the world. Today, people continue to frequently use demonstration as a means of expressing and showing their emotions towards society and its reforms. The event highlighted the issue of police violence, and people's reactions towards it actually led to a change for society, which enabled more demonstrations to be carried out in peace. With this being said, we want to thank you all for listening to this historical guide. Peace, love, and understanding!